Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Why does this painting have a floating head? What really happened to Leonardo da Vinci's missing painting? Today we will investigate some ancient works of art and try to solve the mystery of what is hidden behind them. So get comfortable and let's go! The apparition. Someone would have to be pretty disturbed to paint a floating, bleeding, severed head, don't you think? Well, that's Gustave Moreau for you. The famous artist was often plagued by the thought of death and immortality, and these thoughts can be seen in many of his paintings. I mean, who isn't affected by that? One is called The Apparition, which depicts a gruesome biblical story. It's based on the tale of Salome, the stepdaughter of King Herod, who performed a seductive dance at Herod's birthday party. Her performance was so captivating that Herod promised to give her anything she wanted. This offer, however, turned out to be a huge mistake. Urged by her vengeful mother, Salome shockingly asked for the head of John the Baptist. Why? Because John was the prophet who had condemned Herod for his questionable marriage to his stepbrother's former wife. And, well, Herod delivered. Literally. Moreau's painting captures the aftermath of this grisly request. Salome, dressed in an elaborate yet revealing outfit, stands frozen in front of the floating, disembodied head of John the Baptist. It's not just a head, though. It's a glowing, ghostly vision, dripping blood from the neck. The image is enough to give you nightmares. But what's even more haunting is that Salome seems to be the only one who can see this bodiless head. Is she haunted by her own actions? Maybe. I mean, wouldn't you be if you asked for someone to be decapitated? In the background of the painting, you'll spot a man with a sword. This is likely the executioner, his job already done. So was this horrifying vision a glimpse of the future, or had it already happened? Moreau leaves it up to interpretation. But one thing is certain, Salome isn't the innocent stepdaughter anymore. Instead, she becomes a classic femme fatale, a dangerously seductive figure who is led to death and destruction. With its vibrant colors and dramatic subject matter, The Apparition is one of Moreau's most famous works, showing off his love for painting dangerous women. Salome's story, blending themes of power, lust, and violence, has fascinated artists for centuries, and Moreau's portrayal adds an eerie twist to an already intense tale. Is this a painting you'd want to hang in your home? Let me know in the comments. Leda and the Swan. Leonardo da Vinci's Leda and the Swan is an unsolved mystery of the art world, as are many of his paintings, it seems. The painting is most likely Leonardo's take on the Greek myth of Zeus transforming into a swan and seducing Leda, the wife of the king of Sparta. But since this work of art has been lost for centuries, we may never know for sure. Wait, it's lost? Yes it is. First, let's start with the myth. Zeus, king of the gods, wasn't exactly known for following the rules. He transformed into a swan to get close to Leda, and well, let's just say what happened next wasn't exactly consensual. Artists from different time periods have found this story compelling, though each took their own spin on it. Michelangelo saw the whole thing as romantic, while Da Vinci, who was always a bit of a scientist at heart, gave Leda a maternal touch. In the painting, he includes Leda's twin babies. That's right, after the swan incident, Leda gave birth to not one, but two sets of twins. Now here is where the mystery starts. Da Vinci's version of Leda and the Swan vanished. Gone, forever. How do we know it ever existed? Several artists who came after Leonardo made copies of his painting, and these give us a pretty good idea of what his version looked like. There are also surviving sketches that Leonardo drew, showing how his ideas evolved over time. At first, he wanted Leda sitting down, but eventually he depicted her standing, cradling her feathery swan partner like it was the most normal thing in the world. The big question is, where did the painting go? For a while, it was believed that the painting ended up in the French royal collection at Fontainebleau, a massive palace where a lot of fancy art was kept, not the hotel in Miami. In 1625, a scholar named Cassiano del Pozzo claimed to have seen it there, describing it in great detail. He even pointed out that poor Leda was painted on 3 wooden panels, which were starting to fall apart. Despite that, he was particularly impressed by the way Leonardo had carefully painted Leda's body, especially her, let's say, chest, because YouTube doesn't like me saying certain words. Also, I can't really show them to you because I can't show nudity, but you know what I'm talking about. I don't want this video to get flagged. But apparently, that part was exquisitely finished, according to Del Pozo. Art historians are thorough like that. By 1692, however, the painting had disappeared from the royal collection. Some think it may have been destroyed by someone who found it too risque. Others wonder if it fell apart completely due to damage. But the truth is that no one has seen the original painting in person for centuries. What do you think? Could it still be out there, hiding under layers of another painting? Or maybe collecting dust in some secret art stash? Leonardo's Salvator Mundi, another lost work, resurfaced in the mid-2000s after being hidden for years, so who knows? One day, Leda and the Swan could make a surprise reappearance. Check your attic just in case. The Baptism of Christ. Is Jesus part alien? Is that what's going on Artsegelder's painting, The Baptism of Christ? Listen to this and take a look at the painting, and then tell me what you think in the comments. The Baptism of Christ is not your typical depiction of this famous biblical moment. Sure, you've got Jesus kneeling in a pool of water, John the Baptist performing the baptism, and onlookers surrounding them. Nothing too out of the ordinary. But then you look up and see it, an enormous circular object floating in the sky, shooting beams of light onto Jesus and John. What in the world? Is that a UFO? Painted in 1710 by the Dutch master Artsegelder, the Baptism of Christ has sparked a ton of debate, and for good reason. The painting, which hangs in the Fitzwilliam Museum at the University of Cambridge, shows what many think looks like a modern UFO. The big circular object hovers over the scene, with 4 beams of light streaming down directly onto the baptism. At the center of the object is what seems to be a tiny dove, a common symbol of the Holy Spirit in Christian art. However, the dove is barely noticeable compared to the flying saucer-like disc. Now you might be thinking, did de Gelder just predict UFOs, or was he having fun with his paintbrush? Well, this is where the mystery kicks in. Normally, in depictions of Christ's baptism, light shines from the dove itself, representing the presence of God. But here, de Gelder made it look like the light is coming from this mysterious floating object. So what's up with that? Some people think de Gelder's painting is just a creative take on a familiar biblical scene. Maybe he wanted to make his version stand out from the hundreds, if not thousands, of other depictions of the baptism. After all, he was an artist. Thinking outside the box is what they do best. But then there are those who love a good conspiracy theory. They believe de Gelder might have been suggesting something more otherworldly, like extraterrestrial involvement. Now here's where things get even more interesting. This painting isn't the only example where people have spotted UFO-like objects in ancient religious art. Other paintings, especially from medieval and Renaissance times, also show strange flying objects in the sky during key moments in the life of Jesus. Coincidence? Artistic flair? Or secret ancient knowledge? Unfortunately, we may never know for sure. But stay tuned for more of these UFO paintings, and I want to hear what you think in the comments. And now for a quick break, but first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Lind and Keith Merritt for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family if you haven't already. Saturn devouring his son. Cannibalism in itself is a horrifying practice, but the worst cannibal of all? That would be Saturn. He didn't just consume his own species, he devoured his own children. This barbaric tradition is put on full display in Francisco Goya's painting called Saturn Devouring His Son. This is one of the most terrifying and unforgettable images in art history. If you ever thought you had a bad day, wait until you hear this story. This painting belongs to Goya's series of black paintings, a group of nightmarish murals he painted directly into the wall of his farmhouse. This house, interestingly enough, was called Quinta del Sordo, meaning the Villa of the Deaf Man. Why is that interesting? Because not only was Goya deaf by this time, but his world was also pretty dark. Spain was in chaos, wars were raging, and Goya himself was suffering from depression and paranoia. Now let's dive into the painting itself. Saturn devouring his son illustrates a Roman myth about the god Saturn. Thanks to a prophecy, he was paranoid that one of his children would overthrow him. So he decided the best way to avoid this problem was to eat them. Yep, head first, no utensils necessary. Every time one of his kids was born, he devoured them on the spot. And the award for the worst dad of all time goes to... But luckily for one of his sons, Jupiter, Saturn's wife Rhea wasn't very fond of the whole baby-eating plan and managed to hide him away. Instead of a child, Rhea hands Saturn a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes, and apparently he couldn't tell the difference. That stone was down the hatch. Jupiter eventually grew up, and just as the prophecy said, overthrew his father. He even managed to free the rest of his siblings from the stomach of Saturn. What makes Goya's version of this myth so horrifying is how he depicts Saturn. He's not a powerful god calmly munching on his kid like it's no big deal. Instead, Goya paints him as a wild maniac with bloodlust in his eyes. Saturn looks crazed, his eyes wide in terror or madness, and he is holding the half-eaten body of his child like a rag doll. The roughness of his body, his unruly hair, and the way he is gripping the corpse so tightly that his knuckles are white, it's truly the stuff of nightmares. But wait, there's more. Art experts noticed something else about the child in Saturn's hands. In fact, this doesn't appear to be a baby boy at all, but a fully grown woman. So what's going on here? Why is Saturn eating a grown daughter instead of an infant son? Was Goya making a statement? Many believe that Saturn represents the oppressive Spanish state, devouring its own citizens. Others think it could symbolize the French Revolution or Napoleon. Goya, being the mysterious genius that he was, never gave an answer. In truth, these paintings were never intended for public viewing. They were just for Goya, hidden away on his farmhouse walls. But today, Saturn devouring his son is one of his most famous works, leaving people to wonder, was Goya depicting more than just a myth, or was he simply painting his inner demons? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The Garden of Earthly Delights. Looking at the Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch will make you feel like you're on an acid trip. It's a wild, eye-popping journey through pleasure, sin, and punishment. Imagine a world where people munch on giant strawberries, hang out in fountains, and swing from palace-like structures shaped like weird overgrown plants. That is just a taste of what Bosch's most famous painting depicts. Bosch wasn't always called Bosch. He was born around 1450 in the Netherlands as Jeroen van Aken, and his whole family was into art. While none of their work survived, Bosch clearly picked up the family trade. By the time he got to work on the Garden of Earthly Delights between 1490 and 1500, Bosch was already making waves among the rich and famous, painting for European nobles. So what's going on in this triptych? It's not just a free-for-all of people enjoying themselves. Sure, the middle panel is filled with nearly naked folks frolicking in a paradise of fruit and water, but there is more to it than meets the eye. On the left, Bosch shows the moment when God presents Eve to Adam in the Garden of Eden. But on the right, hell. And let me tell you, it is not a nice place. Here, people are depicted being tortured with musical instruments. There's even one poor guy who has music written on his backside, which someone turned into an actual song called the 600-Year-Old Butt Song from Hell. I swear I'm not making this up. There's also a bird bug monster thing devouring people. Let's just say this isn't a place you'd want to end up. Now, Bosch was a religious man, and during his time, artists mostly painted religious themes. But he wasn't afraid to get weird with it. Instead of showing the usual images of heaven and hell, Bosch took things up a notch, adding a dose of bizarre. Scholars have been scratching their heads for centuries, trying to figure out exactly what it all means. The painting is loaded with symbolism, especially when it comes to the central theme of lust. In the middle panel, people aren't just playing around. They're engaging in all sorts of, let's say, amorous activities. You've got flowers in strange places, fruits being plucked, which totally symbolize the deed back then, and even people riding animals, which probably wasn't just for fun. Seriously, there is symbolism everywhere. But while the middle panel looks like a dreamland, Bosch is actually sending a warning. This garden of delights is fleeting. Those giant strawberries, they are just temporary pleasures, and they'll lead to something much worse, like the creepy hell depicted on the right. The animals, the flowers, even the cracked fountains all point to one thing. Earthly pleasures are fun, but they don't last. Bosch's message seems pretty clear. Live it up now, and you'll pay for it later. Hell is no joke in this painting. Bosch didn't hold back. Some people are crushed by giant ears or fed to monsters, and others are trapped in the body of a tree man. It's like a medieval horror movie with a dark sense of humor. Bosch's hell covers more than lust. He's got greed, vanity, and gluttony in there too. It's a buffet of bad behavior, and everyone gets a punishment. One very unlucky guy is splayed on a harp, getting tortured for the crime of playing secular music. Despite the darkness, though, the Garden of Earthly Delights was meant to be entertaining. Bosch's peers likely got this serious, cautionary message, but they also must have had a lot of fun trying to figure out what on earth was happening in all of those crazy details. The painting was certainly a conversation starter, and people then, like now, couldn't stop talking about it. The more you look, the more you see what's going on. Bosch's artwork still gets people talking today, and that's part of the magic. It's bizarre, creepy, and totally fascinating, blending human desire with dark consequences in a way that feels surprisingly modern. What do you think about this painting? Let me know in the comments. The Annunciation with Saint Emilius. Was Mary visited by extraterrestrials on the day that Jesus was conceived? Is all religion based on ancient stories of alien abduction? Listen to this and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Carlo Crivelli's The Annunciation with Saint Emilius is one of those paintings that seems innocent at first glance. Painted in 1486, it shows the Virgin Mary in a moment from the Bible called the Annunciation, when she finds out she will give birth to Jesus. Most people would say this is a straightforward religious scene depicting a holy light shining down on Mary. But UFO enthusiasts don't seem too sure about that. So, what do they have to say? Well, let's zoom in on that beam of light in the upper left corner of the painting. It's coming from a circular, disc-shaped cloud, sending down what looks like a ray of energy straight to Mary. For most art historians, this is just divine light, but UFO lovers, they are not convinced. Some claim that it looks an awful lot like a flying saucer straight out of a science fiction movie. Keep in mind, this was painted in the 15th century, long before Spielberg got his hands on alien tropes. Skeptics of this will tell you to look closer at the cloud, where they claim angels can be seen. And they're right. If you peer carefully or zoom in with some high-tech resolution, you can make out little angel heads with wings, all tucked into that fluffy disc-shaped cloud. So, is it a UFO or just a heavenly gathering of angels? That's where the debate starts to get fun. There's more to the painting, though. In the lower right corner, we've got that mysterious beam of light doing something strange. It travels straight through a solid stone wall and heads right for Mary's head. According to the Bible, this light represents God delivering the message to Mary that she's going to have a child. But conspiracy theorists have another theory. They suggest that Jesus wasn't the result of a divine miracle, but the result of alien genetic engineering. You heard that right. Alien theorists argue that Mary may have been abducted by aliens and artificially inseminated. The beam of light looks suspiciously like the ones described in modern-day alien abduction reports. You know, the ones where beams of light shine through walls and yank people out of their beds. So maybe Mary wasn't just getting a divine message. Maybe she was getting some alien DNA. Now, before you start packing your bags for Roswell, let's talk about Jacques Vallée. He is a famous UFO researcher who believes we can't ignore these odd depictions in religious art. He is careful not to claim that medieval folks were drawing UFOs exactly like the ones people claim to see today. However, he thinks there is value in studying these strange phenomena throughout history. According to Vallée, we can't just brush these sightings off as random. They might have deeper, more mysterious origins. So, is the Annunciation with Saint Emitius a story about the divine or about extraterrestrials? That's up for you to decide. The Ugly Duchess. The painting The Ugly Duchess challenges the idea that only beautiful women are immortalized on canvas. Created by Flemish artist Quentin Massus in 1513, it is not your typical Renaissance portrait. Instead of featuring a goddess-like figure or a perfectly symmetrical face, this painting throws all of that aside and gives us a character that is downright bizarre. The woman featured has wrinkled skin, sagging you-know-whats, and a face that is hard to describe nicely. Her forehead is bulging, her nose is wide, and her chin juts out like it's trying to run away from her face. And her clothes? Instead of the modest, dignified outfits older women of her time wore, she is rocking a low-cut dress that shows off her dimpled chest. It's like she didn't get the memo on Renaissance fashion. The Ugly Duchess is certainly unforgettable. People either love this painting, hate it, or can't look at it for too long, which is exactly what Massus wanted. This portrait is so famous that it's now the centerpiece of an exhibition called The Ugly Duchess: Beauty and Satire in the Renaissance at London's National Gallery. The exhibition dives deep into how artists back then used aging women like her to question society's ideas of beauty and poke fun at how women were expected to act. So, what's the deal with this woman? Some think she's based on a folklore character, while others believe she suffered from a rare condition called Paget's disease, which deforms the bones. Either way, she wasn't created to be pretty, but that's where the magic is. She is a bold, unapologetic character who's breaking all the rules for how women, especially older gals, should look and behave. She's not hiding in the background or trying to fit in. She's front and center, making people uncomfortable and turning heads. For a long time, people thought this painting was just a satire of female vanity, a woman so obsessed with trying to look young that she becomes ridiculous. She's offering a rose to a man next to her in a separate framed painting, maybe her husband, but he looks like he's about to push it away in disgust. However, art historians now think there's more to it. Emma Capron, the curator of the exhibit, explains that the Ugly Duchess is actually a powerful figure. She is standing in the spot usually reserved for men in portraits like this, flipping the script on traditional gender roles. Massus was likely having fun with this. He wasn't just making fun of the old woman, he was also poking at the whole idea of what art was supposed to be. Portraits in the Renaissance were usually serious, dignified, and all about capturing ideal beauty. But here, Massus blends a formal portrait with a carnival-like character, making it both funny and thought-provoking. Depending on your taste, this likely isn't a painting you'd want to hang on your wall, but you have to admit it's an interesting work of art, one that might make you linger just a little longer than the others. Study after Velázquez's portrait of Pope Innocent X. Have you ever seen a pope screaming? No? Well, you're about to. Francis Bacon's painting of Pope Innocent X is quite different from most other paintings of popes from that time. It doesn't feature a regal-looking pope sitting in a golden chair. Oh no, Bacon took something grand and turned it into a nightmare. By the 1950s, Francis Bacon was shifting his focus as an artist. He had once been influenced by the eerie and surreal creatures Picasso painted in the 1930s. But now he was diving into portraiture, although calling it portraiture is a bit of a stretch. Bacon didn't exactly paint people in the traditional sense. Instead, he mashed up images from all over: magazines, film stills, and random photos from his chaotic studio floor to create portraits that were intense and full of strange energy. His version of Pope Innocent X was inspired by Diego Velázquez's iconic painting of the same pope. Velázquez had painted the Pope with dignity, composure, and power. But Bacon took that refined image and turned it into a terrifying spectacle. And guess what? The scream that takes center stage in Bacon's version didn't even come from Velázquez's work. Nope, Bacon borrowed it from a famous moment in an Eisenstein film. Bacon's Pope doesn't just sit on his fancy throne. He's trapped, surrounded by streaky brushstrokes that look like they're turning his chair into a prison, or maybe even some kind of animal cage. The once mighty throne now seems to move and warp, as if the Pope himself is gripping it to stop from being swallowed whole. It's extreme, to say the least. But what's really grabbing your attention is that scream. It's wild, primal, like the Pope isn't just shouting, he is howling from some deep, dark part of himself. Unlike the famous Scream by Edvard Munch, where the scream radiates outward in waves, Bacon's Pope is all about the internal agony. The scream doesn't spread out. It's like a black hole pulling everything into it. The scream is the Pope's entire existence, his ultimate expression of despair and loss of control. Bacon was a lifelong atheist, and he found a certain thrill in it. He didn't care about heaven, hell, or judgment. In fact, he lived on the edge, both in his personal life and through his art. His painting of the Pope is almost like an epic face-off between a devout leader of the Christian Church and an artist who rejects it all. The Pope, stripped of his authority, is left screaming in the void, his once mighty power reduced to nothing but agony. But for all the darkness in this painting, there's something heroic about the scream. It's as if Bacon is saying that the act of crying out in defiance, even when faced with nothingness, is what makes us human. It's tragic, but it's also kind of epic, don't you think? Visions of Eternity. Imagine being a world-famous art curator and suddenly you're looking at a painting that just doesn't make sense. It would drive you crazy. Well, that's exactly what happened to Caitlin Haskell and Jennifer Cohen, curators at the Art Institute of Chicago, when they were prepping for a big Salvador Dalí show. They had a massive, nearly 7-foot-tall painting called Visions of Eternity, and something about it stood out to them. The painting, held by the museum since the 1980s, had a mysterious past, and Dalí's usual style wasn't exactly screaming out from it. Dalí was known for his weird yet familiar visuals, like melting clocks and flaming giraffes. But Visions of Eternity was different. Instead of packing the canvas with surreal figures and layers of symbolism, this one had a simpler, more open feel. The curator started to doubt whether it was really a Dalí at all. Dalí was super famous for painting smaller works with intricate details in the 1930s. And Visions of Eternity was a bit of an oddball compared to that. It loomed large among his smaller, more detailed paintings, leading the team to question its authenticity. But they weren't just going to give up that easily. Haskell and Cohen dove deep into Dalí's archives to figure out where this mystery piece came from, trying to place it in his body of work. The curators teamed up with the museum's conservators, Alison Langley and Katrina Rush, who had some serious tech tools at their disposal. They x-rayed and scanned Dalí's other paintings, uncovering hidden gems. For example, they found a secret portrait in King Ludwig II of Bavaria in his painting called A Chemist Lifting with Extreme Precaution the Cuticle of a Grand Piano. He didn't skimp around with the names. They also discovered a sneaky little dog in his artwork Inventions of the Monsters, a reference to Dalí's close friend, poet Federico García Lorca. Dalí seriously loved sneaking hidden things into his art, like Easter eggs, before Easter eggs were a thing. But for Visions of Eternity, no hidden portraits or dogs popped up, so they had to take another route. The detective work continued when Cohen stumbled across a Dalí illustration for Vogue magazine in 1939. This small clue, a tiny figure that looked a lot like the one from Visions of Eternity, hinted that the painting might be linked to something much bigger. That's when the curators remembered a massive surrealist pavilion Dalí designed for the 1939 World's Fair in New York. And guess what? When they looked at photos of the pavilion, they spotted the painting. Visions of Eternity wasn't just a painting. It was the painting, a piece of a much larger mural called Dream of Venus. Turns out, the Art Institute's mysterious painting had actually been cut out from a giant mural that Dali had created for his trippy, surrealist pavilion. On this pavilion, mermaids or topless women performed in a funhouse filled with fish skeletons and other bizarre creations. At first, the curators thought Dali had directly copied Visions of Eternity in the mural, like referencing his own previous work. But after consulting with the conservators, they realized that Visions of Eternity was literally a piece of that mural, cut from the giant artwork and renamed. Finally, they found the answers they were looking for. So, after some serious detective work, the painting was renamed Dream of Venus and redated to 1939. But the mystery isn't fully solved. Questions still remain about why the mural was split up, how the painting ended up at the museum, and where the missing pieces of the mural went.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
The beheading of St. John the Baptist. Out of all of the Renaissance artists who operated in Italy during the 17th century, Caravaggio was by far the most psychotic and dangerous. He was a known murderer, a man who had a horrible drinking problem, and whose dark inner demons inspired some tragically beautiful artworks. One of these artworks is called The Decapitation of St. John the Baptist. It's the biggest and greatest painting that Caravaggio ever completed. It was commissioned by the Knights of Malta and finished in 1608. It is still in the St. John's Co-Cathedral all these years later. The painting is special for one main reason. It is the only masterpiece that Caravaggio ever left his signature on, and it was written in blood. Experts believe that by signing such a gruesome painting in his own blood, a painting which depicts St. John the Baptist in the middle of having his head sawed off, Caravaggio was admitting to murder. It was in May of 1606 that Caravaggio got into a fistfight with a man named Ranuccio Tomassoni on the streets of Rome and bludgeoned him to death. Art historian Andrew Graham Dixon believes the pair were fighting over a female prostitute who was having a love affair with both men. Purely out of guilt, and while working on his greatest masterpiece after fleeing Rome to escape a murder charge, Caravaggio may have left his signature as a subtle way of confessing his crime. The fake Hitler paintings. Before Hitler became the leader of the Nazi Party and marched the Germans into World War II, he had an affinity for art. Hitler produced up to 3 paintings a day when he lived in Vienna between 1908 and 1913. Believe it or not, Hitler made a living by selling his own paintings of Vienna to tourists visiting the Austrian capital. Critics have called his work mediocre at best, although Hitler almost certainly considered himself a genius. These days, Hitler's art is way more valuable than most people care to realize. In 2015, 14 of Hitler's paintings and sketches were sold for nearly $500,000. And in 2019, a German auction house made headlines when an attempt to sell original Adolf Hitler paintings was foiled by forgeries. Local prosecutors seized 63 watercolors, drawings, and paintings that were forgeries attributed to the dead Nazi leader. The auction house only managed to sell 5, which they believed were the real deal. The truly shocking thing is finding out not only is Hitler's art wildly popular, but it's also worth so much money that people are making fakes and risking jail over them. Michelangelo's David. In 1501, the great Michelangelo began to sculpt what would become his most controversial and adored piece of art. His statue of David has captivated people for 500 years. But what nobody's ever been able to determine is what exactly David has in his clenched right fist. If you're not even sure who David is, let's back things up a bit. In the Bible, David is the hero who fought and killed the Philistine giant Goliath, a man who was said to be a literal giant and undefeatable. Ordinary David, with nothing but a shepherd's staff, 5 smooth stones, and a leather sling, took the Goliath down. He would go on to become King David of Israel and Judah. In the Bible, David was an extremely important figure. He was a true hero, just like Hercules from Greek mythology. Michelangelo's statue of David was meant to show David before his battle with Goliath, which was quite strange for artists to do in the 16th century. Artists typically made artwork of David after defeating the giant, normally in a position of victory. But Michelangelo took a different approach, showing a strong and confident David ready to stand before the invincible giant. In David's left hand is the pouch for his sling. Art historian Sergio Risaliti believes the sling was attached to a weapon called a fustiball, or a staff sling. This was a terrifying weapon that was used for centuries as a primitive bazooka. It was like a portable trebuchet, a sling attached to a staff that could fling large rocks like stony grenades. Is it possible that a fustiball may have been the legendary weapon that David used to kill Goliath? On the other hand, we can't physically see what's clenched in David's right fist. Some have even speculated he's holding the severed manhood of Goliath, and that the statue was indeed meant to depict David after a victorious battle. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. The Last Supper. Leonardo da Vinci wanted to capture one of the most important events chronicled in all four of the Gospels in the New Testament: the Last Supper before the death of Jesus Christ. According to the Bible, the night before Jesus Christ was betrayed by Judas, sold for silver, and crucified, he and his disciples sat down for dinner. It was at this dinner that Jesus Christ prepared his disciples for what would happen following his execution. He also gave instructions how they were to remember him once he was gone. Leonardo da Vinci's version captures the few seconds after Christ revealed that he would be betrayed before the sun came up. The Last Supper was kind of like the first reaction video, showing in a snapshot what Leonardo thought each of the 12 disciples' reactions would be upon hearing the news. But there are few secrets about this wildly famous painting that you might not know. For example, when Leonardo started it in 1495, he had never created anything quite so large. The whole thing was an experiment, from the size to the pigment. It's also true that before the painting was ever finished, it was already flaking off the wall. Over the years, it decayed rapidly. The painting of the Last Supper that still survives has very little of its original paint left. In the 20th century, Panin Brambilla Barcelon, a famous restorer, used microscopic photography, took core samples, and used sonar to look beneath added layers of paint. His job was to restore the original work as best he could. But through the scans, he found that so much paint had already been added over the years that very little of Leonardo's original paint was still there. The Lady and the Unicorn. The Lady and the Unicorn is a series of 6 tapestries woven in Paris around the year 1500. Experts have called the series the Mona Lisa of the Middle Ages. The tapestries are simple in their elegance, showing a lady of seemingly noble status in various scenes with a unicorn. The most famous is the one in which the woman is standing before a tent, its flaps held open by a lion and a unicorn, all presented against a lovely backdrop of flowers and fruit trees. The biggest mystery when it comes to the Lady and the Unicorn series is that nobody knows who created them. They were made 500 years ago in the days of medieval France, although there is no mention of them in any historical record until 1814. Some experts have theorized the lady may have been Mary Tudor, the Queen of France from 1514 until 1515. Others believe each tapestry represents one of the senses: touch, taste, smell, hearing, and sight. The 6th tapestry, which is wider than all the others and presented in a slightly different style, has been interpreted as the sense of the soul, or a kind of 6th sense. Hidden Picasso Nude. A hidden Picasso nude has just been revealed thanks to artificial intelligence. This isn't your 21st century nude, but rather a naked portrait of a woman crouching in the fetal position. She was discovered hiding underneath the surface of the painting, The Blind Man's Meal. The painting was created by Pablo Picasso in 1903, but underneath it was an entirely different painting. The hidden artwork has been dubbed the Lonesome Crouching Nude. and nobody knows who the woman was or why Picasso went through all the trouble of painting over her. The discovery was made by Oceapalus, a company which specializes in artificial intelligence technology. Their AI tech used superimposed XRF imaging to bring the original work to the surface. They first found the outline of the painting, then added brushstroke after brushstroke with artificial intelligence. The software then generated a height map to give the painting texture, and the whole image was printed onto a canvas using 3D printing. It was quite the process from beginning to end, but the result was a flawless recreation of the hidden Picasso nude. This is something that never would have been done without modern technology. All we really know now is that the painting dates back to Picasso's blue period from early on in his career. This was the time when Picasso didn't have a lot of money, and so he frequently had to reuse materials. This often meant that even great portraits had to be erased and the canvas reused. Madonna and the UFO. The Madonna with Saint Giovannino was painted near the end of the 15th century by Domenico Ghirlandaio. The painting shows the Virgin Mary looking down on the infant Jesus and Saint John the Baptist. But what separates this version of the Madonna and the baby Jesus is that looming over the Madonna's shoulder is a UFO in the sky. The painting is absolutely bizarre. There is really no mistaking the UFO for being anything other than a flying saucer from outer space. The Madonna may not be paying attention to it, since it's way behind her head in the background. But the artist did include a man in the background standing with his hand to his brow, staring up at it. He's obviously looking up at the object, and that could not have possibly been a mistake. Even the guy's dog is looking straight up at the UFO. There has been a lot of speculation over this weird painting throughout the years. It's currently housed at the Palazzo Vecchio in Venice, donated after the death of American art collector Charles Loesser. But the part that people can't agree on is whether the UFO was an extraterrestrial being from outer space or religious symbology. Some have said that the object in the sky isn't really a spaceship full of aliens, but really just one of God's heavenly objects, such as an angel in the form of a bright star. The Night Watch. Rembrandt was a great artist who suffered a tragic life. When he died at the age of 63 in 1669, he was buried in an unmarked grave. He had outlived his wife by 27 years and outlived all the children they had had together. Rembrandt was arguably the most talented artist of his age, yet he died poor. So poor he couldn't afford a tombstone. Rembrandt's greatest and most mysterious painting is The Night Watch, completed at the peak of his success in 1642. The painting shows a civic militia in Amsterdam darkly lit. There is a man on the drums, a dog barking, and a mysterious woman in white stuck in the crowd of armed men dressed in black. Some have theorized it was this very painting that caused Rembrandt to fall into poverty and be forgotten during his own age. Expert Peter Greenaway says the painting appears to show a murder plot being devised. It could be that the civic militia hated the painting so bad they had Rembrandt's career ruined, thrusting him into poverty. Girl with a Pearl Earring. Girl with a Pearl Earring was created during the Dutch golden age of artistic invention in the 17th century. Artists took their inspiration from Renaissance techniques, and beautiful pieces of art were spawned across the Netherlands and other parts of Western Europe. Girl with a Pearl Earring was one of these Renaissance-inspired artworks, completed by Johann Vermeer in 1665. The Dutch artist was famous for his fantastic depictions of contemporary life. Most of his paintings depicted domestic interiors and women going about their daily life. Girl with a Pearl Earring was one of over 35 paintings that he finished, but it's definitely his most famous. He saw only moderate success while he was alive, and didn't become internationally famous until the 20th century. The one big mystery regarding this acclaimed painting is that no one is sure who the girl is. Some have suggested she wasn't even a real model, and that Vermeer was such a genius that he created her out of the light itself. He may have brought this mystifying subject to life as a way to show off his advanced painting techniques. When you look closely enough at her face, you can see that she doesn't have a single line. Vermeer painted her contours using light itself, and perhaps never had a specific person in mind. If true, that would have been an incredible imagination for someone from the 1600s. Secret nativity scene. British experts were recently investigating a damaged painting from 400 years ago. As they were investigating, they found a painting hidden underneath from the even earlier medieval period. The original piece of art was a mysterious painting of John the Baptist when he was beheaded. The artist is unknown, with the painting currently owned by the Bowes Museum at Durham University. It was painted on a single piece of canvas and then stretched over a wood panel. But the artwork was highly damaged. When experts used X-ray scans to see what needed to be fixed, they found the shadow of an infant underneath the painting of John the Baptist. Further examination showed a manger, angels, and 3 wise men. It turned out to be a nativity scene, likely painted years before the picture of John the Baptist. Looks like somebody tried to wash off the original so that they could do their own painting. Thanks for watching! Which of these mysterious paintings is your favorite? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye!